everyone, hope everyone is doing well. Welcome to 21st of October, The Hindu Analysis, and I hope you have already gone through the daily decode of Saturday also, and today we'll complete the daily decode of The Hindu newspaper. So moving forward, the topic or the relevant topics from today's newspaper are: militant shoot dead 7 civilians in Ganderbal, Kashmir. Now, the issue is not about the militancy there, the shifting of militancy in Jammu region, and secondly, why they have suddenly targeting, or rather in the last 1 to 2 or 2 to 3 years, the non-locals in Kashmir. Obviously, this is a scheme so that destabilization happens in Jammu and Kashmir, specifically post abrogation of Article 370. Terrorism in Jammu, and why Quad partners participate in consecutive naval war games. So this is related to exercise Malabar. We'll also talk about that. Exercise Kakadu also we'll talk about that. The new Lady Justice statue symbolism and significance. Again, the Lady Justice has been changed. What is the Indian interpretation of that? Why we have changed it? We'll also talk about that. And the challenges which is still in the justice system. Odisha braces for Cyclone Dana, and we'll also talk Cyclone Dana or Cyclone Dana, and what is a tropical cyclone, and some basic and background information related to it. Then today's editorial, a wonderful editorial has been written by Shashi Tharoor sir. It's about the India's choices in a renewed bipolar world, in which he speaks about the China, he writes about China, he also talks about America, and specifically he talks about Cold War 2.0, which is very different from Cold War 1.0. And finally, we'll have some tidbits, then question and answers, and some extra mile for those students who wants to read more articles. So these are the important news for today, which we would be dealing with. Okay, so moving forward with the first news. Militants gunned down 7 in Kashmir, say officials, and this includes a local doctor and 6 non-local workers. The attack took place in Gagangir area, a construction site near Zedmore Tunnel. Now, these attacks are basically towards non-locals. There has been attacks on Kashmiri Pandits also, and there has been attacks specifically wherever there are construction sites or big infrastructure projects are being made in Jammu and Kashmir. Recently, we've also seen a lot of 40% of targets have shifted in the Jammu region. Earlier, if we go back in the militancy, majority of the militancy episodes or majority of the militant or terror attacks used to be in the Kashmir region. But now, if you see from 2020 to 2024, the militancy is moving from Kashmir Valley and then towards Jammu region. So Kashmir Valley and Jammu region is majorly divided by a Pir Panjal range. We'll also talk about that, why terrorists are using Pir Panjal range as hideouts, and why they are being very successful also. Recently, they have been very successful in those hideouts. So first of all, we'll just complete the news related to this. This is the map position of Ganderbal. Okay, it's in the Kashmir area. So unknown gunmen arrived at the construction site and they started shooting, and these non-local workers were shot, and basically terrorists are trying to send the message that non-local, non-Kashmiris will not be allowed, and if the government is thinking they would be able to bring peace, stability in the region, that would not be done. Specifically after the peaceful election which happened, in which the new chief minister of Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir, Umar Abdullah, has come. So they are trying to send a message that you might have an elected government, but we will not stop the terrorism here. We will try to destabilize Jammu and Kashmir, and Pakistan will definitely use this issue that people of Kashmir are fighting for an independent Kashmir, and they would try to broadcast over the United General Assembly all over the world, which Pakistan has done even in the past. It was very surprised that at the Shanghai Cooperation SCO summit, Pakistan did not speak about Kashmir. That was very different what they did in the last summit. So, but anyways, this is what is happening. Police spokesperson confirmed the death of 3 workers, and reaction and condemnations came from Amit Shah sir, from the Home Minister, then it came from the Jammu and Kashmir Lieutenant Governor Manoj Sinha. Jammu and Kashmir Lieutenant Governor Manoj Sinha. These have come context of recent violence, targeting of non-local workers. Now, for this news is more relevant for why the targets are shifting towards Jammu, rather than that some people in this unfortunate incident that some of the local people, non-local people have been targeted. So the killings are part of a broader trend where 40% of security personnel deaths in J&K since 2021 have occurred in Jammu region, underscoring a rising threat in the area. This is the major part of the news which we need to understand, why terrorists are now targeting Jammu region much more than the Kashmir Valley. This is the most pertinent part of the news which we will try to decode for you. Okay, so these have been recent, like Sanjay Sharma in 2023, he was a Kashmiri Pandit, he was also killed. Then there has been a spike in targeted attacks in Kashmir with 29 attacks in civilians in 2022, and even in 2022 the attacks on civilians were much more than security forces. So if you see, they are targeting more civilians than security forces. This trend was in 2022. So they are trying to scare, they're trying that the civilians which are staying, they get afraid and they stop coming to this area. This is the entire psychosis. The terrorism entirely works on fear psychosis. So they are working on this fear psychosis, that the fear, the people should be afraid of coming to Jammu and Kashmir. The stabilization, infrastructure development, whatever the positive outcomes government is trying, that it comes in post 370 abrogation in Jammu and Kashmir, that should be stopped and people get into this fear psychosis cycle. So claim of responsibility, which the earlier attacks have happened, this is not related to today's news, this is related to 2023 attack which happened on Mr. Sanjay. The Kashmir freedom fighters took the responsibility, and see what they wrote on their online statement. Pandits, Kashmiri Pandits of being pawns of occupation after the revocation of Article 370. So again, the focus is that the Kashmiri Pandits, which government is trying that they get their ancestral land back, they go back to Jammu and Kashmir, that should not happen. So this was Kashmir freedom fighters, a new terror group in Jammu and Kashmir. Now this is the major part which we need to understand, the background of the news, that why attacks have been shifting to Jammu, why there is a spike in terrorism in Jammu and Kashmir, specifically in Jammu area in Jammu and Kashmir. So let's understand this. So there are majorly, these are the condition, or these are the pointer: geographical advantage of Pir Panjal range, diversion of security forces resources in Kashmir Valley and the Ladakh region, strategic calculation by terrorist group, local support networks they have already established over last 10-20 years, relatively lower surveillance and monitoring, changing tactical patterns in terrorist infiltration. So we'll decode one by one. Let's start with geographical advantage of Pir Panjal range. So if you see this orange part which you see, this is Pir Panjal range. So approximately in Jammu and Kashmir, and the part which goes to the Pakistan occupied Kashmir, this is around 200 miles approximately, and this is at the height of 12,000 to 14,000 feet. So this range gives a very good geographical advantage to terrorists. So what is happening is that when a terrorist comes, so when he enters Poonch, when he enters Poonch or Rajouri, he straight away tries to goes into the Pir Panjal range. So for example, if the security forces are behind him, so once they enter this range, now this range has such dense forest that even surveillance and drone systems are not able to work properly. Everybody knows that drones are not, the technology of current drones are not so much if we are using in dense forest, they are not able to work properly. And in this dense forest, specifically after 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the evening, the night comes very early in these mountainous areas, and early in the morning also there is a huge amount of fog. So this gives a natural advantage to terrorists. First is that. Second, this is such a big, it is around like 200 miles long. Now in this, you cannot put entire security forces, the entire 200 miles, it's feasible, it is not feasible. So in this context, once they enter this range, it is very difficult to find out their hideouts. Obviously, operations have been done in the past. In Jammu, in 2003, Operation Sarpa Vinash operation was done, in which more than 10,000 security personnel were deployed and the militancy came down. Now, relatively in Poonch, Rajouri and these areas, the forces have been less because the operations by militants in these areas were relatively less, and they majorly used Poonch and Rajouri to cross over and do operations in valley. Now what has happened is that the operation in valleys by most of the militants have not been so much successful because security forces have been increased, they have been beefed up. Now Operation All Out happens in 2017, the militancy came down. the Hizbul Mujahideen, which is a local terrorist group which focuses on LT's local terrorist recruitment of local Kashmiris. So they radicalize and they recruit local Kashmiris. Its entire spine and back was broken by the Operation All Out, very successful operation. Now and then, so majority of the army security forces were deployed in the Kashmir Valley, and then after 2020, the Galwan clash, they were deployed towards the Galwan side, towards the LAC side. Now here, majority of the security forces were deployed. Relatively, the security forces in Jammu region were less. First, second, the operation or the militant operation, the terrorist operations or terrorist attacks in Jammu region were also less. Now, once the militants or the Pakistan-sponsored terrorism realized that the operation in Kashmir are not successful, they started moving their focus towards Jammu and specifically towards the civilian population, that if we start killing civilian population, irrespective of security personnel or not, again that will become international news. Again, that will break the morale of security forces and people will again start questioning that is the central government or the state government now, are they really, they can take care of the security, they can take care of the citizens or not, and eventually many of them might start having fear psychosis and they start moving out of Jammu region or Kashmir region. So they are using Pir Panjal range. So what happens if the security forces are behind them? They enter this Pir Panjal range. Obviously, by the time security forces try to catch them, they cross over, they go towards the Kashmir side. So until and unless on both the sides you have security forces, which is a massive operation, and the security forces, I have already started an operation called Operation Sarv Shakti with 15 Corps and 16 Corps, which is also known as White Chinar Corps. 15 Corps is also known as Chinar Corps, based on Srinagar, and the other one, 16 Corps, is based out of Nagrota. They would be doing this operation from the flanking towards both Pir Panjal and Kashmiri side, and then countering the militants. So this gives a natural geographical advantage to terrorists, this dense forest, and these terrorists have been using these areas for a very long period of time. So they have been able to develop their logistics. They know the routes very well. Now since they were not deployed in this region for a quite amount of time, since their deployment has started, they will re-understand the routes and everything, and eventually the militancy in Jammu and region would also be coming down. It is just a matter of time. So Poonch and Rajouri were majorly used as a routes to cross over, and terrorists have been using it for a very long period of time. So once a terrorist has entered Rajouri, he can reach Kulgam through mountains and to Kokarnag. So this is the route: Rajouri, Riasi, Kulgam, Kokarnag. So Rajouri, Riasi, Kulgam, Kokarnag, and Poonch, you can go to Shopian. Shopian is in Kashmir. Pulwama, I am very sure you remember Pulwama attack. Badgam, Baramulla, Uri, I am sure you also remember the Uri attacks. So they majorly use these areas to enter, but now, while moving towards, they do some operations, get into Pir Panjal range, which is very difficult to trace them out there, and then they enter all these areas. So if the security forces are from Kashmir side are trying to catch them, or eliminate them, they get into Pir Panjal range and move towards Poonch and Rajouri. So until unless we trap them on both the sides, that is the part which the security forces need to do. So I hope you understand what is currently happening. So this is your Pir Panjal range. Now you can see how dense this is. Okay, this is a very dense area. Obviously, this is more of the tourist area. The real photographs obviously are not available, which terrorists are using in public domain. This is the Pir Panjal range. These are there some kind of hideouts, and obviously the advantage of that early evening, early night, and the early morning fog also works for terrorists. And surveillance and drones are not able to work. So diversion of security resources in Kashmir Valley, we've already discussed that it was Kashmir Valley and then Galwan. Strategic calculation by terrorist group. Now what they have started doing, rather than sending in bunches, they used to send 10, 20, 30 terrorists in bunches. Now they have come down to the number of 3, 4, 5 terrorists, which are the best of their terrorist classes or schools, and they go with a specific target, because once you start sending them in a bunch, it is easily to catch them. Local support networks and logistics. So over the period of 15-20 years, these terror groups have been able to create their logistic support bases in these areas. Relatively lower surveillance and monitoring. I have already told you that the security forces were less in this area, and drone and surveillance capabilities or the technology which we currently have is not proper or adequate to resolve this. Changing tactical patterns in terrorist infiltration. They are using different routes and small numbers. And Operation Sarva Shakti and Sarpa Vinash we have already discussed. So Sarpa Vinash was done in 2003. 2023 we started with Sarva Shakti 2024, and 15 Corps and 16 Corps are majorly doing operations here. So we complete this news. Now we move towards Quad group of countries take part in back-to-back naval war games. So next news is about Quad. Quad stands for Quadrilateral Security Dialogue. So 4 countries, 4 democracies are part of Quad: India, US, America and Australia. Number of groups have come out of Quad, like you can also say, though not exactly out of Quad, but today you also hear of a group called AUKUS, Australia, UK and US. So they will give nuclear submarines to Australia so they can counter China. Now there's one more group which we are talking about, Squad, which basically stands for US, Australia, Japan and Philippines. And Quad stands for US, Australia, India and Japan. Okay, I hope I didn't say China. China they are countering. Okay, so now they are starting what is Quad. It's a group of 4 democracies: India, Japan, Australia and America. So initially this idea came from Shinzo Abe in 2007, and this grouping, so Japanese at that point of time, even for that matter Australians and the Americans, they knew that when we speak about Pacific Ocean or South China Sea, the threat from Chinese was rising around 2007 and 8, and as post 2008 China started growing economically. They were already growing economically, but they started pushing their hegemony post 2008. And most importantly, when BRI comes and when they start building their artificial islands in South China Sea, start claiming the Spratly, the 9-dash line. Initially it used to be 11-dash line, then 9-dash line came, then we also talk about Spratly Island. They started creating these artificial islands and started militarizing them. So the threat in this area was increasing. Already China claims that Taiwan is a part of it, and the Taiwanese government and Taiwan has got the support of Americans. At this point of time, in the initial years or rather the late 2000s, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe said that China is a threat, we need to counter it. The word China is not used, this is obviously behind the curtains, that we need to counter this. Then these 4 democracies come and they say that we need to create quadrilateral security dialogue. But at this point of time, the Australians, they were threatened by the China and they do not join the group, and this Quad could not take off. So it is from 2007 we come to 2017, after 10 years, finally the group comes. So it is in 2017, India, Australia, US and Japan came together and formed this quadrilateral coalition. Now initially the main context of forming Quad was unhindered free maritime route. So if you see India, America, and this is your Australia, and this is somewhere is Japan. So the routes, the maritime routes, they can easily pass, because China, if you go through strings of pearl strategy, their BRI, people think Belt and Road Initiative is a trade policy. It is not a trade policy, rather it is a geopolitical policy of creating ports and islands. One of the example is Hambantota Port, which has been given for 99 years by Sri Lanka to China. Now BRI, if you take this policy, trade policy is part of that geopolitical policy under which BRI is being run. So China wants to create these ports and wants to create these military ports and islands where they can control this international maritime trade, where they can control sea lanes of communication. Now this is what Quad is against, that you cannot control these sea lanes of communication, because if you start controlling them, then you threat global trade, and rather free global trade which has a independent movement. So common interest of unhindered maritime trade and security. And we all know China is now the biggest threat. It's a very different story that Americans are right now involved in Russia-Ukraine war, or for that matter Iran-Israel war. These are not the major threats. If you go through the national security strategy of major countries of Europe, you go through national security strategy of Australia, Japan and Americans, the biggest threat to them is China, not Russia. But again, right now Russia-Ukraine war is there, and that is why Americans are involved. And China would always want that these kind of wars continue. They will keep funding it so that the Chinese rise cannot be stopped, or Chinese expeditionary rise cannot be stopped. So moving further in this, so the idea of Quad was given by Prime Minister Shinzo Abe in 2007, and today if we talk about Quad today in 2024, it looks after a lot of things: health security, infrastructure, counter-terrorism, cyber security, counter-disinformation, lot of things. But maritime security was the major agenda on which it started. Humanitarian resistance, cyber security, technology, climate change, all these things. So over a period of time, Quad has definitely expanded, and recently the 6th summit, Quad summit, happened in it happened in America, and off the mic, rather some voice or some sound clips of Joe Biden, the president of America, Joe Biden, came out where he wants that Quad should give statements specifically naming China, but India will talk about this free maritime trade routes, but India is not taking a direct stand on China under Quad. Because again, India is part of BRICS, India is part of SCO, so India also needs to maintain diplomacy, and most importantly, India needs to think what is good for India rather than going into different groupings. So earlier we used to talk about we used to talk about non-cooperation movement, and not non-cooperation movement, I am talking about strategic autonomy. This is the word which we talk about today. Okay, strategic autonomy. Okay, strategic autonomy is a word which we use today. That India should be non-cooperation movement. I went to history. So I am talking about non-aligned movement. This is the one which I wanted to refer. Non-aligned movement, where India did not become part of, neither when the Cold War was happening, neither the part of the Americans or neither the part of USSR at that point of time. So today we can say that the new word for it, it's called strategic autonomy, that India will have its own policy when it is talking to Israel, Palestine, Americans or Russian. There is one more word which is used in geopolitics. It is also called de-hyphenation policy. De-hyphenation policy, that India will have their individual policies specific to Israel, specific to Palestine, Iran, Russia, America, and India will first focus on India's interest. And we can see that when it comes to Russia and Ukraine war, we are talking about peace and ceasefire, but when it comes to India's interest of buying oil and gas from Russia, we are taking that oil and gas. And Jaishankar's statement has already come in the open, that when Europe was criticizing, he says the amount of oil or gas which we are taking from Russia, that amount Europe is taking in a single day, and that too from Russia, and they are actually fighting against Russia. So this global hypocrisy or the European hypocrisy was very much out on the open stage. But again, coming back to Quad, this was the major thing Quad is looking towards, and the expansion of Quad, in which South Korea, New Zealand and Vietnam, there might be further expansion. On Saturday news, we were talking about BRICS expansion towards Thailand and Malaysia we were talking about. Now we are also talking about expansion of Quad, and Quad, even if we are not naming China, the Quad grouping indirectly focuses on the Chinese threats. So the 6th Quad summit happened at Delaware in America, and the first Quad summit was virtual in nature, and that was also done by the Americans. And Biden, definitely the presidency of America definitely wants that Quad should directly targeting Chinese. The Indian government has not agreed with that. So Quad partners participate in consecutive naval war games, 2 naval war games, exercise Malabar and exercise Kakadu. So it will focus on interoperability and anti-submarine warfare. So what is interoperability? Interoperability means that if Indian Navy is doing an operation with the Americans or with the Russians or with any other Navy, we start understanding how they operate, and they start understanding how we operate in the terms of operations, day-to-day things, or majorly what is done in that exercise. Once we start understanding how they operate in an operation, tomorrow if there is a war, it's very easy to understand each other's methods, and then we can easily do a comprehensive operations. So under interoperability, we try to learn the best methods of each other and try to inculcate and work towards a common goal. So this is interoperability, anti-submarine warfare skills was there. So first exercise Kakadu happens. This is towards the Australian side, and exercise Malabar. Exercise Malabar had started in 1992 between India and US at that point of time, and later other countries joined. So exercise Malabar started at Visakhapatnam, that was the harbour phase, and later Bay of Bengal, which was the sea phase. Now sea phase is much more important because you do a lot of advanced tactic operations there. So 2024 edition of Malabar happened in October in Visakhapatnam harbour phase, and then Bay of Bengal sea phase. So it included complex operational scenarios. So key activities including submarine warfare. A lot of focus was there anti-submarine warfare, because Chinese have become now the biggest or the largest navy in the world, and they are deploying huge amount of submarines in this Indian Ocean area and then Pacific area, which is a great threat, which is actually a big threat not only to Americans but all the countries which are in Southeast Asia and including India, where their focus is also string of pearls strategy. Now India has a counter strategy to it, which is called diamond necklace strategy, and also one informal strategy which is spoken among some of the geopolitical experts called double fish hook strategy. So you can read about them, or please mention them in the comment section if you know about them. What is string of pearls strategy and what is India's counter strategy to it, which is also called diamond necklace strategy? Please put that in the comment section. So again, the focus was on undersea domain awareness, Quad concern over expansion of Chinese Navy, specifically in Indian Ocean region, so that they don't start controlling these sea lanes of communication, which can hinder free trade over the coming years. So major exercise included surface weapon firing, anti-air and air defense exercises, operation involving shipborne helicopters, and seamanship. Seamanship, that is how seamen are operating and how their skill sets can be enhanced over a period of time. Then you had maritime interdiction operations. So interdiction operations are those when you stop enemy or their supplies to reach a particular area. So these operations were also done so that each of the navy with each other, be the American, Indian, Australian or Japanese, they learned the best methods of doing maritime interdiction methods. So finally, we had participating units from India side. You had INS Delhi, then you had INS Tabar, you had the corvettes also, you had frigates also, INS Tabar, INS Kamorta, then INS Shakti Fleet, and PATI, Maritime Patrolling Aircraft, which does the patrolling and surveillance of this, specifically towards the anti-submarine warfare. From Australian side, you had HMAS Stuart, and Japan you had JS Araike, a Morisam class destroyer, and US had USS Dewey, Arleigh class destroyer. So these were the ships, frigates and warship used by different navy, and special forces from all the countries were already there. Now let's move towards this is the background of it. I've already covered. Exercise Malabar started as a bilateral exercise between India and American. 1992, over a period of time, interoperability, fostering mutual understanding, and many countries, specifically Japan and Australia, have joined. And now if you see the quadrilateral, all the 4 countries are joining, and over a period of time, if the Quad expands, the number of countries might increase in this, and if the exercise happens, this can be a direct or rather an indirect message to China that if you are thinking that you can control these sea lanes of communication, this free trade sea lanes of communication by enhancing your navy or by deploying your navy to counter us, it can be countered by Quad. Now exercise Kakadu 2024, this happened from September, in the month of September 2024, this was towards Australian side. So exercise Kakadu happened, then exercise Malabar happened. Focus of exercise Kakadu was humanitarian, and again the focus was maritime exercise, flagship maritime. Focus was on regional maritime security and international partnerships, and humanitarian aspect also. So key focus, war fighting to humanitarian operations, and from Indian side, PATI with the other ships was participating in this exercise. So what is the strategic significance? The strategic significance of this exercise, or strategic significance of Quad or Quad exercise, is to tell China indirectly that if you think that you can control this area of maritime area or where free trade is passing, or if you think that you can control Taiwan, or if you think that you can put a fear psychosis or create artificial islands and the entire Southeast Asia would be scared of you, then you are on the wrong path. So this is a counter group which was being made to basically target China, but we never say this, we never use these words that it is an anti-China group. If you go towards the Chinese statement, China app always say that Quad is an anti-China group, though our focus is not only on maritime security today, it is on humanitarian response also, it is on cyber security also, counter-terrorism also, health security also. So over a period of time, the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue or Quad has expanded. Today we are also talking about Squad. AUKUS has also come out, which can give nuclear submarines to Australia so that they can target nuclear threat of Chinese, which they keep saying towards Australia. So emphasis on maritime security, growing Chinese naval activities, interoperability and collaboration. Now the focus is China, but we will never be using the word China when it comes to Quad. Whichever document which comes from Quad, they never use a word China, and though Americans want it, but that's not happening. Okay. So this is a mains question on the current article. So you can use the information given in the PDF. Discuss the significance of Quad recent naval exercise, Malabar and Kakadu in enhancing maritime security, interoperability in Indo-Pacific, particularly in the light of growing Chinese naval activities. You must have seen Chinese have recently, they have thrashed the boats of Philippines, maritime security. They keep doing their, recently they also did a maritime drill and surrounded the Taiwan island, and so that the fear can be created, they can get afraid of the Chinese Navy, and they keep saying again and again that Taiwan belongs to China, Taiwan belongs to China, same way which they say about Arunachal Pradesh also. So next is, what does the new Lady Justice statue signify? Again a wonderful article which has come in today's The Hindu. So moving further, new Lady Justice statue symbolism and significance. So the statue has been replaced. The earlier statue was based on Roman mythology. The recent statue which has come, so new statue is distinct with the Indian culture. She wears a sari. She has scales also in her hand, his constitution. So this is more relevant to Indian ethnicity, Indian culture, and that is why you must have seen in the Indian Navy and many of the military establishment, we are doing decolonization. Whatever has been the colonial symbols, we are getting rid of them and moving towards more Indian symbols and Indian signs. Okay, so Chief Justice of India recently unveiled the new Lady Justice statue at Supreme Court premises, replacing the original one. The new statue is distinct, clothed in sari without a blindfold, holding scales in one hand. Yes, the blindfold has also been removed, and by blindfold, once it has been removed, it shows that when it comes to Our Lady Justice, she sees everyone equally, whether it is coming from an ST, or the underprivileged background or privileged background, in the eyes of the law. It is not blindfolded. So let's go to the background of this. Background of the Lady Justice, historical origins. So this used to be the symbol which before we replaced the Indian justice, and in many parts of the world it is still being used. So the concept of Lady Justice believed to have originated from Justitia, which comes from Roman mythology. And what does this signify? Obviously, when it comes to Lady Justice blindfold, she has a blindfold, she has a sword, and she has scales. So one by one we'll go through it. So if we talk about scales, so scales means that when it comes to judiciary, they would be listening to the both sides of the act, both sides, from the side of the accused also and from the side who have put the case also, then only they will take the final decision. Sword signifies power and authority, that it can give justice also and it can punish also. So justice, punish, it can give anything as per the sword. And finally the blindfold. So blindfold, over a period of time, it has changed. So in 14th century, that is the time of the Renaissance movement, it used to mean, the Renaissance period, 14th century, critique of corrupt legal system. So that time the blindfold used to mean that. Later in the 17th century, in the 17th to 18th century Enlightenment period, this blindfold started meaning justice should be administered without any bias. So scales represent balance, emphasizing need to weigh both sides of an argument before reaching a verdict. The scales have been maintained in the new statute also. Okay. The sword signifies the power and authority to protect as well as punish. So that was the sword. Instead of sword, we are now having constitution book, which signifies that constitution is the most supreme thing when it comes to law and legal process in the country. So significance, obviously we are moving towards, I've already told you that decolonization is happening. The symbols of Indian Navy was changed. So decoloniality, moving away from colonial symbols and adopting element closer to Indian tradition. Clothing in the sari, which is again more closer to Indian thought process, more closer to Indian cultural identity rather than the Western attire. Removal of the blindfold, because the law is not blind, everyone equally, acknowledging the country's social diversity. So when it comes to law, a person coming from the underprivileged section or the privileged section, there would be no discrimination in the terms of when the law or the legal process sees that. Next is replacing the sword with constitution symbolizes supremacy of the constitution, specifically in the Indian legal system, that the constitution is the most supreme thing. Scales remain, indicating that the courts will continue to weigh evidence impartiality and both sides should be heard before giving the final judgment. So scales have been again continued. Rest, everything has been changed. So what are the, apart from this, a lot of things came out that it's good that we are changing the symbol, we are doing decolonization, but then the thought remains, this is very good. But what about the problems which is still in the legal system? One of the major problems is pending court cases. More than 5 crore court cases are pending. And in this 5 crore cases, 4.6 crore cases are pending at state level, and around 4.4 crore and around 60 lakh cases are pending in the High Court. So urgent action is needed. So in this, finalizing the memorandum of procedure. So MOP, when I talk about MOP means that still the procedure, the memorandum of procedure has not been established by the government. There's a tussle going between the government of India and the courts so that they can come up with a procedure how the judges should be appointed. So appointment of judges by the collegium, this fight has been going for 8 years and still we don't have a correct procedure to do it. Cases are being pending, around 4.4 crore cases are pending in state level. Judges recruitment has not been done. Same is the case with the high courts also. So ensuring social diversity in judiciary, again the problem is there. Less than 21% of the judiciary, higher judiciary represents backward classes, SC, STs and minority, and less than 15% represent women. So this also has to be increased so that the diversity, social diversity comes. Appointment should better reflect the social diversity of the country. Filling vacancies in high courts and lower courts. So high courts are operating only at 60 to 70% capacity, backlog over 60 lakh. And state, I've already told you, the problem is there, 4.4 crore cases are pending. So prioritizing important cases involving constitutional validity, constitutional amendment, they should be focused, or when it comes to individual liberty should be heard on a priority basis by higher judiciary. So this is related to the legal system, the symbol which has been changed, the statute which has been changed, and the current problems of our legal judiciary. Now, Odisha braces for cyclone Dana, likely arrival on Thursday. So this is a tropical cyclone. The pointers related to the Indian judiciary. First important pointer or the problem is number of pending cases. More than 5 crore cases are pending in the courts, around 4.4 crore cases in the lower courts, and around 60 to 70 lakh cases in the high court. And the recruitment of judges has to be improved so that these cases can be resolved. Even a litigation was put in Supreme Court, public interest litigation, that sought a 3-year deadline to resolve these cases, but that litigation was also not accepted. Urgent action needed, finalizing the MOP. MOP is needed between the government and between the courts so that there is a procedure which can be established for the appointment of judges. Now this has been lagging for more than 8 years. Next would be ensuring social diversity in judiciary. Specifically, the point is less than 21% of judges come from scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, or other minority areas or backward classes. Similarly, less than 15% come from women. So the diversity, the social diversity needs to be increased specifically in the higher judiciary and other areas. Filling vacancies in high court and lower courts. Now when we talk about high courts operate only at 60 to 70% capacity. So when you work at 60 to 70% capacity, there is a 100% chance or more than 100% that number of cases would be piling. So this is a vicious cycle. So until unless we resolve the root cause, the number of cases will keep piling up. prioritizing important cases specifically related to the amendment, laws, and the individual liberties. So this was the summarization. Next, we move towards the Odisha. Odisha would be hit by 24th October by cyclone Dana. It's a tropical cyclone. So tropical cyclone are also known as hurricanes and typhoons. What is a tropical cyclone? Tropical cyclone generally originates on the tropical ocean area, and after that it hits the coastal areas with a huge amount of wind speed and carry a huge amount of destruction. So they can vary in speed, size, and intensity. As per WMO, they are the second most destructive, dangerous natural hazards after earthquakes. So tropical cyclones are violent storms that originate over oceans in tropical areas, move over to coastal areas, bringing about large-scale destruction caused by violent winds, heavy rainfall, and storm surges. Now, if you go back in the last 2, 3, 4 years, number of tropical cyclones have been increasing. Again, there was a question in UPSC Mains 2024. It was related to tropical cyclone. A tropical cyclone had also hit Shanghai this year. So these cyclones are increasing. What are the reasons? And definitely the climate change is one of the reasons for this, because as the oceans are getting warmer, the chances of a tropical cyclone would be very, very high. Now, these are some of the important pointers related to why tropical cyclones occur, or what are the conditions needed. First of all, you need a large sea surface area with temperature more than 27 degrees. You need presence of Coriolis effect. Then you also need upper divergence above the sea level system. Also, you need a pre-existing low level disturbance or low level pressure or low level cyclonic circulation, small variation in the vertical speed. These are the major conditions you need before a tropical cyclone can start. So these conditions are favorable. Now, cyclones are known by different names in different parts of the world. Like cyclones, if we see the Indian Ocean area, they are called Willy Willies in Australia. Western Pacific, South China Sea, they are called as typhoons. Indian Ocean cyclones. Atlantic, they are known as hurricanes. So this map and this diagram will help you in the PDF to remember them. This question has been asked multiple times in the UPSC exam. So this is the same thing if you see. Again, through a map, tropical cyclones, hurricanes towards the Pacific, and the Chinese side, you see typhoons. Australia, tropical cyclones, they're also known as Willy Willies in Australia. Moving on next, what are extra tropical cyclones? This question has also come in prelims also. Extra tropical cyclones or temperate cyclones are one of the same things. They happen in the mid latitudes between 35 degree and 65 degree latitude in both the hemisphere. They happen in both the hemisphere. Generally, students have the tendency to think that the temperate cyclones only happens above the Atlantic Ocean or the above 35 to 65 degree latitude in the northern hemisphere. They also happen in the southern hemisphere. A question in prelims has also come related to this. So they are active over the mid latitude regions between 35 and 65 degree latitude in both the hemisphere. The direction is from west to east. If you see tropical cyclone, the direction is from east to west. These statements have also come in the prelims question. And one more important fact, it is at these latitudes that the polar and tropical air masses confront, they mix together and they form fronts. This is very important fact, please remember it. It is at these latitude zone polar and tropical air masses meet and they form front. Very, very important. Next, so this is a photograph diagram. We have more than 7516 kilometers and more than 75% of our coastal area can be affected or prone to cyclones and tsunamis. You can use this to make it in the UPSC mains, or if a factual part you want to write to substantiate your answers. This is again a small table. Pressure condition at the center, cyclone low, anticyclone high, and this is again, so northern hemisphere anti-clockwise, clockwise, clockwise, anti-clockwise. So whatever are the conditions of cyclone, the anticyclone is exactly the opposite condition when it comes to northern hemisphere, southern hemisphere, and pressure condition at the center. Okay, now let's go to the tidbits section of the paper. So Nepal has said that Nepal will not be, no Chinese activities will be allowed in Nepal's Nepal's territory. Oli has said to Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli, again sitting in the lap of China, is giving statements very, very pro towards China. Recently, they also came up with a 100 rupees currency note where they said Limpeadura, Lipulekh and Kalapani, all these three belong to Nepal and not India. There is a tussle going between these about these three places, specifically between India and Nepal. So Indo-Nepal relations right now have not been good, though talks have started between India and Nepal. If we see from 2016-17 onwards, they have become very pro-China. Here he is also talking about One China policy. So what is One China policy? One China policy stands for that there is only one China. Taiwan also belongs to one China only. China here means which is People's Republic of China, which is run by CCP, Chinese Communist Party, and Taiwan, which is also known as Republic of China, also belongs to PRC only, or it also belongs to the big China, which we talk about. So this is One China policy, and under One China policy, China says there are no two separate China, one the PRC one and one the Republic of China. It is only one China, and Taiwan also belongs to the PRC China, or People's Republic of China, run by Chinese Communist Party. So this is One China policy, and Nepal is also supporting it. This also tells the closeness of China and Nepal, and also tells how geopolitically Nepal is having a shift from India towards China, and definitely India needs to take steps. Somewhere down the line, we'll also have a discussion how in the last 4 to 5 years, Indo-Nepal policies have also changed, how geopolitical relations are changing between India and Nepal. Next is your former General Prabowo Subianto has become the new head of Indonesia. Indonesia is world's 4th most populous nation, and he would be succeeding Joko Widodo. So this is again a factual news. So he is the Indonesia's new president. Bengaluru to host 2 days national conference on biodynamics. So what is biodynamics? Many of you might know, many of you might not know. That is why I am covering what is biodynamics. So when it comes to biodynamics, it is the idea that farm is a living organism. Farm is a living organism which is interacting with environment to give us good food and soil. This is what we call biodynamics. Environment to produce healthy food and soil. Biodynamics is a holistic, ecological, ethical approach to farming, gardening, food and nutrition. So this is what we say, what is biodynamics. So multiple statement question can come where they might put statements related to biotechnology to confuse you. I hope that you would be aware what is biodynamics. Next is Police Commemoration Day, which is celebrated on 21st October 2024 in Karnataka. Police Commemoration Day for Karnataka. Next is your total of 9.3 lakh new members. EPFO shows 9% growth in subscriber base. So what is EPFO? EPFO stands for Employees Provident Fund Organization. It is under the Act Employee Provident Fund Miscellaneous Provision Act 1952, and it is under the Ministry of Labour and Employment. Again, all factual part which can come in any of the prelims questions. Next, Kalidas Samman has been given to Raghupati Bhatt, who comes from Mysore, for his painting, the Kalidas Samman 2023. Who is Kalidas? So Kalidas, I hope many of you might know. Please do put in the comment section who is Kalidas. Just to tell you, who was around the time of Gupta era, and he is known for Meghdoot and Abhijalan Shakuntalam, many plays and stories and poems he have written. So some of them I'm telling you, and he is a classical Sanskrit author, poet, and he's celebrated all over the world. Next is coming to today's editorial, wonderful editorial which has come from Shashi Tharoor sir, and it talks about that how we are today seeing a new Cold War 2.0 and how India can balance between the Americans and the Chinese. Indian choices in the world becoming bipolar again. So we are again moving towards a bipolar world, one which is dominated by Americans and other is dominated by Chinese. And as per the author says that India should take the advantage when it comes to American and Chinese rather than becoming one of their pawns. That is the exact theme, and that is the exact points which comes out of this entire article or editorial. So digging deep, world is witnessing a renewed bipolarity between the US and China for global hegemony and global dominance. Now, this global hegemony and global dominance today is very different from Cold War 1.0, which happened between USA and USSR. So, what is USSR? Union of Soviet Socialist Republic, which used to be from 1922 to 1991, because in 1991 the breakup of USSR happens. So at that time, you know, there was no convergence between USSR and USA. They were mostly fighting in the terms of intelligence, space, and different wars. Even the Cuban crisis happens at that point of time, in which they almost come close to have a nuclear war. So I would definitely tell you, please go and read about Cuban crisis. That is one example of brinkmanship. That is one example when the Americans and Russians, or the Americans and USSR, almost came close to have a nuclear war. And the Cold War 1.0 was also a fight of ideology between capitalism versus communism. So capital versus communism, these are certain things which you can read also about, specifically about the 1.0. So Cold War 1.0. So India must navigate this evolving landscape without being reduced to a pawn in the geopolitical region. I think I've already covered this, that we should use China and the Americans to our advantage. We should not be only having a policy that America is trying to use India against China, or China is trying to use India against America. This shouldn't be our game. Our game should be to use both of them to our advantage and leverage. Situation comes at a time when India's relationship with US is improving, but at the same time with China, we are having the problems near the Galwan area and also in the Indonesian area and the Pacific side. So rebalancing of global powers, emergence of new biopolarity. Unlike the US and USSR, there's a difference between the Chinese and USSR at that point of time. If we talk about US and China today, they are connected economically. They are also having cultural exchanges. US is highly invested in the Chinese economy. China has bought a major chunk of US treasury bonds. So they are economically integrated. They do talk to each other. This is very different from the Cold War 1.0, which used to be there between US and USSR. So this is a very different kind of Cold War, and we should take advantage of this. So they engage in cultural exchanges, tourism, education, etc. So if we see China, if we talk about manufacturing, China is the leading manufacturer. They have the largest navy, but when it comes to the entire military capabilities or the military bases, ports, America, or even the defense technology, defense weapons, Americans are still far ahead of the Chinese, and China will take some time, or rather a decent amount of time, to catch them up. So US strategy has shifted to counter China's rise. This was very similar to the containment policy. So Americans used to have a containment policy against the Soviet Union. So what used to be this containment policy? It was against communist ideology, it was using intelligence, it was against their space program, it was to break the USSR, and eventually they are successful. USSR does break in the early 1991, it breaks, you know. So this is what they were doing, and Americans were eventually successful in breaking the Soviet Union. So please, you need to use this word, containment policy. Very important. US strategy, China's rise remains reminiscent of the containment policy used against Soviet Union. Now, at that point of time, US was increasing base in West Asia. They also contained the Russians in the Afghanistan. Afghanistan is a graveyard of empire. Eventually, the Americans were also put to the graveyard, be it Britishers, Russians, or for that matter, the Americans who, under the regime of Trump, made the decision to come out of the Afghanistan. So containment policy, definitely talk about when you're writing an answer if the question comes to there. Now in today's context, the differences from the Cold War bipolarity, interconnected economies. Chinese military is growing, but the capabilities are still not equal to the Americans. No ideological struggle between China and the Americans. There is no ideological struggle which was there in Soviet Union versus the American. That is the capitalism versus communism. Okay, role of Russia in emerging. Now a wonderful thought has been given by Professor Joseph Joffre. So he says that the world today is 2.5 power. Now this is a wonderful term, 2.5 power. He says one is Russia, one is China, one is America, and Russia, because Russia is today not a full power. It is a half power because it has nuclear capabilities, it has huge amount of natural resources, and it is aligned with China. Now China is giving support to Russia. That is why they are still, even with so many economic sanctions, Russia's economy is still going up, because they know that there is a backup of China. So in terms of 2.5 world power, if I talk, Russia, China, America, and the junior partner of China called Russia. So this is a term where Russia plays a junior partner role to China. China supporting Russia's action in Ukraine. So this is a new world order which we are seeing today. Shifting geopolitical landscapes in the Indo-Pacific. So three important parameters which comes out. First important parameter is Chinese ambition. Chinese ambition to become a blue water navy. Blue water navy. So what is blue water navy? Blue water navy means when your navy can do deep operations, not only operations out here. So it means that the Chinese Navy can not only do the operation near the South China Sea or on this area, but it can do operation in Indian Ocean, Atlantic Ocean, Northern Atlantic Ocean, Southern Atlantic Ocean, Pacific area, Northern America, which today in real sense, America has a blue water navy when you can do deep water or deep sea operation far away from your country. That means you will have tankers, that means you have number of frigates, and that is why China is focusing on, or rather it has become the largest navy in the world. Obviously the capability of that navy in terms of technology, frigates, warship, aircraft carriers might not match Americans, but that is what they want to achieve, because once they achieve the blue water navy, they can target anywhere in the world. So this is what they are trying to achieve. Second is India's role in the containment of China, and that is why America and many countries are putting their money or putting their bucks on India, because India is a democracy and they have the ability and can fight the China. US shaping the shift from global power, because now US, at one point of time, the entire focus of the world was Atlantic Ocean, but today it is moving towards Pacific and Indian Ocean. And that is why US has also changed the name of its command. Now it is Indo-Pacific Command. It talks about it. Again, the focus is what? The focus is your Indian Ocean and Pacific Ocean. The shift, the geopolitical shift is happening, and America know. If you even read the national security strategy of Americans, Europeans, major European countries, they all talk about the biggest enemy is China. They don't talk about Russia. Russia might be there, but not as a big threat as China, because China is a manufacturing giant, economic giant, is far bigger than Russia today. So it is the one which has replaced USSR, and economically they are a giant. So moving further, new alliances have come. Quad has come. Quad, we had a wonderful discussion earlier in the day. I need to say earlier in the session. Then AUKUS has come. AUKUS is Australia, UK, US, which will give nuclear submarine capabilities to Australia so that they can fight the Chinese. And the next is additional groupings like Squad. Squad also we have discussed. Squad is US, Japan, US, Japan, Australia, and Philippines. This is the extended, you can say extended version of Quad. India is not part of this, in which the focus is again on specifically the South China Sea area, and Philippines has been taken because Philippines has been regularly targeted by the Chinese warships, maritime patrols. Their ships have been rammed, and Philippines is trying to continuously fight the mammoth Chinese Navy and the number of artificial islands China is creating. So this alliance underscored Washington's ongoing commitment to integrating all Indo-Pacific areas and targeting the excessive claims in the region by China. So India strategic. So balancing act in the US-China, India should not become a pawn. Rather, our focus should be safeguarding our sovereignty and trying to resolve the differences with China, integrating more economically with them for our advantage, but at the same time bolstering our military capabilities. Next would be strategic autonomy. India's approach should promote geopolitical and economic interest on its own terms, not dictated by external. So if it's America is trying to dictate us, or Europeans are trying to dictate us, or Chinese, Pakistan, any country is trying to dictate us, we should not be dictated. We are a sovereign country. It should be independent decision making. And as India believe today in de-hyphenation policy. So a de-hyphenation with China, or a de-hyphenation policy with the Americans, or with Israel, with the Palestine, Iran, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, Turkey is independent. Today, if you listen to a lot of geopolitical thinkers, they keep telling when it comes to India, India's first interest today is India. If you listen to Jay Shankar sir, he also talks the most important interest is India. Even in the earlier in the discussion, I told you when the Russia-Ukraine war was going on, India did buy gas and oil from Russia. That does not mean that we are supporting Russia or Ukraine in the war. When it comes to Russia-Ukraine war, we are talking about peace. Prime Minister himself has said that this is not the era of war. Multiple times he has said, and that was the message he had given to the Russian president also. So we are very clear when it comes to what we want in a war, but we are also very clear what we want economically, what we want energy-wise, diplomatic. We are very clear with this goal, and this is a very good approach in the terms of having independent policies, and most importantly, we'll take care of the security challenges on our terms and our goals. Now, these are two important books by Shashi Tharoor sir. If you're an UPSC aspirant, you can go through them. First is An Era of Darkness. This might help you in the GS paper 1. Pax Indica is very good for GS paper 2. So obviously you should go with these books once you have completed the basic books and the basic text. So this will only enhance your answers. So these are two questions which I have given on the basis of this editorial. So once you go through this question and once you've gone through the editorial, you'll understand how to answer. This US-China economically intertwined despite their strategic rivalry. Analyze how this independence impacts India's foreign policy. With the emergence of new groupings like the Quad and AUKUS, Australia, UK and US for submarine, to Australia nuclear submarine, critically evaluate India's role in these alliances. How should India navigate? So these are two questions. Now let's move towards the questions. So jet stream occur in this is a PYQ of 2020. Jet stream occur in the northern hemisphere only. It's a wrong statement because jet stream occur in both the hemisphere. Only some cyclones develop and this is a correct statement. Temperature inside of a cyclone nearly is 10 degree lesser. It's not lesser, rather it is warmer. So first and third statements are wrong. Second statement is correct. Rest of the explanation has been given here. Now moving in South Atlantic and Southeastern Pacific region in tropical latitudes, cyclone does not originate. What is the reason? The reason for this is intertropical ITCZ seldom occurs. Since ITCZ is not happening in these areas, there are two important things which you need for cyclone. One is called synoptic vorticity and the other is called convergence. Once you have synoptic vorticity, you get anti-clockwise and clockwise spin. Once you get convergence, you get large scale spin and thunderstorm activity. So that is why ITCZ is needed. Obviously, lower sea temperatures is also one of the reasons, but the main reason is the absence of ITCZ in this area. Rest you can read here. So the extra mile is for everyone who wants to go and read extra articles. Essential business priorities in changing world. This is related to the B20 group. It is a business community group under the G20. I've added some pointers for you. You can go through them. And similarly, one more article is there on climate finance to developing nations. I've also added the pointers related to this article. So we wrap up the today's session. On Saturday the session came around 10 o'clock. Today we are working that the session comes early. Thank you very much, and I hope the audio and video is very clear to you. Please mention in the comment section if you want me to cover certain other areas, and do share the videos, and please like and share and do press the notification button and the icon. Thank you and take care.